By the late 1800s, the River Tyne played a significant role in transporting goods to and from the north of England, and as such the North Eastern Railway expanded their network significantly along the river and throughout Newcastle. Many of these harbour branch lines were served by many different locomotives performing many different duties, and among these many different engines were two unique little shunters built to handle some equally unique working conditions. In 1870, the North Eastern Railway opened a new branch line in Newcastle upon Tyne connecting Manners railway station to the quayside. Because of where the two were positioned, the branch line had to be built sharply turning to the right from Manners station down to the quay, creating a sort of horseshoe shape. As well as being sharply curved, the line was also steeply graded at 1 in 27, and to top it all off passed through 3 long tunnels. Taking trucks downhill from the station to the quay was easy enough, but trying to climb back up the grade with a set of loaded wagons proved to be a challenge. The steep grade often caused locomotives to stall in the narrow tunnels, and combined with the lack of space and ventilation, often meant drivers and firemen were choked by the smoke from their engines. Even if the engine stalled close to a tunnel entrance, winds frequently blowing from the west would simply blow the smoke back into the tunnel, and on rainy days it was almost a guarantee that the engine would come to a standstill. So bad was the driver's visibility because of the smoke that crews often resorted to holding the blade of the fireman's shovel against the wall to see if they were even still moving. Worse still, it's reported that sparks from the engine's funnel often set light to packing straw in wagons. By 1902, the idea of electrifying mainline railways was starting to pick up traction, and the North Eastern Railway was keen to trial this new system on their network, starting by electrifying a few suburban passenger routes around Tyneside. The NER's chief mechanical engineer at the time, Wilson Worsdale, also felt that electrification would help solve many of the problems caused by the tunnels on the quayside branch line, as well as provide an opportunity to study how well electric traction performed when handling freight traffic. Plans to electrify the line were put in place and were completed by June 1905. A quirk of the line was that it was powered by both overhead wires and a third rail. The tunnels had to be electrified by means of a third rail, since they lacked the clearance to accommodate overhead power lines. But as the engines would be shunting around yards outside of the tunnels, a third rail posed a danger to workers on the ground, and so overhead power lines were used everywhere else. To work the line, the railway ordered 2 locomotives from British Thomson Houston, with the specifications that they'd be able to start a 150-ton train on the steepest grade of the line and be able to complete the 3/4-mile journey in 4.5 minutes. Thomson Houston and General Electric of America had previously designed an electric, steeple cab locomotive for use in Italy, which had proven to be quite successful, and so they decided to essentially replicate the design with a few modifications for the North Eastern Railway. The 2 04+40 Bobo electric locomotives were completed in 1904 and numbered 1 and 2, with the frames and bodies being built by Brush Engineering, while the electrical equipment was designed and installed by British Thomson Houston. Measuring in at 28 feet long, they were fitted with 3-foot driving wheels, 4 160 horsepower motors, electric headlamps and bow collectors fitted on their bonnets. Both were put to one side until the electrification was completed in 1905. Once in service, they were both found to be excellent performers, capable of comfortably pulling a set of loaded wagons up the 3.7% grade in 4.5 minutes as specified, pulling an average of 6 goods trains up and down the line every hour. As the line was only single track, only one engine was ever operating at a time, with the engine in service alternating from week to week. Even with these new electric locomotives in service, shunting at the quayside itself was still primarily done by steam locomotives, usually either a Y7 or J72 tank engine. The shunter would usually be fired up in the morning and towed down to the yards by one of the electric engines, and would then be towed back up the line again for servicing at the end of the day. Unusually for an incline, the engines were always attached to the upper end of the train, with a special 20-ton brake fan fitted with sanding gear connected to the lower end. This was due to the positioning of the lower tunnel's entrance, as, if the locomotive was at the head of the train with the brake van at the rear, the van would still be in the tunnel when the train reached the quayside. Manually braking individual trucks was out of the question due to the presence of the third rail, and so this awkward arrangement was used instead. Upon reaching the quayside, the brake van would be uncoupled and freely roll into a siding. The trucks could then be dropped off, a fresh load could be collected, and the brake van would then be picked up as the train set off back up the tunnel. Despite their great performance and lack of choking smoke, the engines were by no means free of teething troubles. Because they took power from both a third rail and overhead wires, a knife switch was fitted in the cab to allow the driver to switch between picking up power from the rail or the wire. The issue was the switches were mounted in a position that made them easy to accidentally lean on and unintentionally cut power to the locomotive. A protective wooden casing was eventually put around them to help prevent accidental switching. 2 men were also needed in the cab to safely operate the engine, not only because switching between pickups was tricky to do alone, but also because the locomotives lacked any form of dead man's mechanism, and so should a driver become incapacitated at the controls, there was no safety measure in place to automatically stop the engine. Engine crews also found the cabs to be quite cold in winter, and so electric heaters were fitted in 1906. A few years later, the bow collectors on the bonnets were removed and replaced with pantographs fitted on the locomotive's roofs. These were the only modifications the engines received, as for the rest of their careers they remained otherwise untouched, quietly moving trucks between Manners Station and the quayside. It wouldn't be until 1945 that both number 1 and 2 were officially given a classification by the LNER, this being ES1. Their numbers were also changed to 6480 and 6481 in 1946 before becoming 26500 and 26501 in 1948 when they came under the ownership of British Railways. The pair kept working their little branch line until 1964, when they were finally replaced by Class 03 diesel shunters, which could not only handle the grade in the tunnels, but also weren't restricted to electrified lines. The pair were withdrawn and number 2 was scrapped in 1966. Number 1, however, was donated to Leicester Railway Museum in 1968, and from there eventually became part of the National Collection in York. While they were by no means the best electric locomotives in the country, the ES1s did help prove to the North Eastern Railway that electric traction was viable for freight work, which then led to the creation of the EF1s as well as many other electric locomotives. Not bad considering the ES1s only ever worked on one branch line hardly a mile long for their entire lives. Just goes to remind us then that many great things often find their roots in humble beginnings. Subscribe for more.